The world as we know it is not so slowly coming to an end. According to the International Energy Agency, carbon emissions were at least 2% higher at the end of 2020 than the beginning of the year, despite a drop. And with carbon emissions on a global trend, it's only a matter of time before we see a fever pitch in a climate crisis. All over the globe, and in the past year alone, many countries have increased their carbon emissions into the atmosphere. The IEA reports that China alone increased their carbon emission by over 75 million tons. The ocean is an enormous carbon sink, and it's essential for humans to thrive. According to the World Economic Forum, the ocean absorbs over 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide in a year. Now, I've spent many hours reading articles, news reports, watching documentaries, and I've talked a good bit in depth in my geology class about climate change and its effects on the environment and the economy. Today I'll talk to you about something I can do to reduce the impact of climate change in the environment. First, I'll start with why climate change is such a drastic and important issue. Second, I'll provide a simple solution you can do to help fix the problem. And third, we'll visualize the outcome of the environment and economy with and without this solution. The world's ecosystems have had an increasingly large impact since the 19th century, with more and more carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere each year and less reduction of carbon from the atmosphere. We're nearing a global crisis, and it may come sooner than you expect. The more and more carbon that is released into the atmosphere creates a difference in the composition of the atmosphere. An increase in carbon in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases affects the way that solar energy is trapped by the atmosphere and kept within the Earth's ecosystem. This effect causes a warming because of the gases reflecting the sun's waves back into the Earth instead of off into space once they initially hit. Now, this warming can and has already started to melt Earth's glacial reserves and raise the sea level drastically. According to NASA, if Greenland alone, if their ice melted, it would raise the sea level by over 20 feet, which is insane. These rises in sea level will affect coastal towns and just a lot of people all over the world. And not only will the sea levels rise, but the oxygen concentration in the atmosphere will dwindle. If the current trend of burning fossil fuels continues, the rise in temperature and sea level will affect millions. Climate Central, an independent group of scientists and journalists, report by the end of the century, the sea level could be as high as 6 feet above sea levels from 1992, putting nearly 8 million Americans at risk for flooding. The resulting high temperatures from the growing greenhouse gas level would have a serious impact as well. The temperature would lead to a higher uptake of water via evaporation, which would cause more wet weather in some places and more dry weather in others. The survey that you all took shows that the majority of the class already feels that we're on the brink of a global crisis. While the rise in sea level may not directly flood your home, it will have a significant impact on the economy and the availability of products or services that are based in places affected. Not only that, but the rise in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases will have an effect on your lives as well. The weather changes alone could cause flooding, not from the ocean in your house, or a drought due to the inconsistency of the water distribution. What most people believe that they can do to help this environmental crisis is to reduce their use of plastics. And plastics are made mostly out of fossil fuels themselves and are usually thrown away or burned and put the fossil fuels into the atmosphere. Now, many people try and recycle their plastic as a way to prevent waste, but according to PBS.org, only a mere 8% of plastic recycled actually gets recycled. The best thing that you can do to help this global crisis is protect the ocean by boycotting the fishing industry and voting for legislation that is proactive about the climate. The commercial fishing industry has had an enormous impact on the ocean's environment. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, over 30% of marine habitats, such as mangrove forests and coral reefs, have been eradicated. With such massive effect on the ocean, there's bound to be substantial effects on the rest of the world's ecosystems. The ocean is one of the world's largest carbon sinks, absorbing tons, millions of tons of CO2 in a year. And if we kill off the ocean's ecosystem, the ocean will not be able to soak up nearly as much CO2. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration from the U.S. Department of Commerce states that up to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from plants and organisms in the ocean. Boycotting the commercial fishing industry will reduce the amount of demand for seafood and other sea products, and therefore reduce the amount of supply for those products. And by reducing the supply, we can reduce the amount of damage that fishing vessels do to the marine environments. The other solution is to vote in government officials who are aware of the current problems and who are willing and want to act upon them and find a solution. It's a significant portion of the people were able to boycott the fishing industry. It would significantly lower the demand of fish and therefore the supply. And fishing vessels won't stay out on the sea as long, causing as much damage if they need a significantly smaller catch to be able to come home. Nobody wants to stay on the sea for longer than they need to. So if we reduce the amount of fish that needs to be caught, we reduce the amount of damage done. By voting in government officials who are aware and willing to act out against this problem is super important. The government has a much higher control of the effect that we have on the climate than you or I, meaning that with the right people in the government, a drastic change could be made to the funding, for example, that we provide to fishing. Most people's argument against boycotting the commercial fishing industry is that there are more impactful problems like the use of plastic. But more than half the people in this class believe that the use of plastic has a large impact on the Earth's climate. And to that I would agree, plastic is harmful. But according to EcoWatch, over 80% of the plastic that composes the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is fishing nets alone. The fishing industry is having an enormous impact on the world around us, and it's in a great need of change. Let's imagine for a moment that people decide not to change the way the fishing industry operates. The more fishing that is done, the more marine habitats that will be destroyed. The more marine habitats that will be destroyed, the more CO2 in the atmosphere. The more CO2 in the atmosphere, the higher the global temperature. And with an elevated temperature, weather would be effective, causing flooding and droughts irregularly, along with less and less oxygen for us to breathe. Now, imagine that we do make a change in the fishing industry. With less destruction of the necessary marine habitats, the oceans will be able to recover from the damage that we have already done, and the amount of carbon absorbed by the ocean will be able to increase and not decrease. The commercial fishing industry has been wreaking havoc on marine ecosystems and bring around drastic climate change that can and should be avoided at all costs. Without the marine habitats in the ocean, the atmospheric composition will change, leading to drastic changes in weather, available water, and oxygen for us to breathe. By lowering the demand of fish and voting for agents of change, we can change the fishing industry and help preserve the necessary marine environments that keep us alive. If we don't take action, the ocean will be cleared of wildlife, and we will be led to a climate crisis, the likes of which we've never seen. The only thing that you and I can do to help solve this issue is to boycott the fishing industry, reduce the demand for seafood, and vote for government who will bring around change. The ocean, and moreover, the world is in danger of a huge climate crisis, and you and I have to do anything we can to save the lives of millions.